So the iPhone X is heading towards being 3 years old. As a landmark device for Apple that represents the biggest design overhaul we've seen in years, the iPhone X was a pretty significant iPhone at the time. But recently, it's sort of been forgotten as the XR and the 11 take the spotlight for most people as the choice for the affordable iPhone. But what many people don't realise is that you can get a 10 for just under £400 used. So should you consider it over more recent iPhones? Well, yes, but also no. iPhone X was a true flagship. Apple tried to change the definition of what an iPhone is, so they left absolutely nothing out here, and that's what makes this phone so great in my opinion. And even through the release of the XS, the XR, the 11 and the 11 Pro series, Apple haven't forgotten about this phone. They've kept it updated at the same pace as their newer phones. It's seriously fast, and honestly, it blew my expectations in every category. Well, every category except the cameras. At a first glance, you'd have trouble distinguishing the front of this iPhone from even the 11 Pro. Apple introduced this design with the X, and it hasn't changed since. Its 5.8-inch display is just amazing, sporting a 19.5:9 aspect ratio, 82% screen-to-body ratio, and a stunning OLED panel. And because it's an OLED, you get a much better viewing experience, especially in low light, which is something that LCD models on the iPhone XR and 11 simply can't match. And speaking of things that are amazing, this video was brought to you by Mogul News. Mogul News publishes hand-picked stories from some of the world's largest publishers, including The Economist, The Times, Bloomberg, and more. It covers largely tech, business, and political news, and is my new go-to for news reading. Mogul News is a new type of news platform, giving you a daily briefing that covers the most important headlines, collections that are deep dives into certain topics, and my personal favourite, perspectives that are groups of articles offering opposing viewpoints on particular topics. Available for Android and iOS, Mogul News is my new favourite news platform. Check out the link below to make it yours too. The design of the iPhone X fits in pretty well in the current market. Its stainless steel edge gives it a premium finish that really ties the glossy front and back together, and it creates that premium look and more importantly the premium feel that the current Pro line iPhones have. It's just a fact that this phone's build was exceptional for its time, and that still carries forward to today. The materials are brilliant and the phone feels really great in the hand. It's not too heavy or too light, and it ticks all the boxes for me in terms of weight distribution and ergonomics. The most obvious indicator that it's not a current generation phone is just that camera housing, but it doesn't make a big difference to the use of this phone, and at the end of the day the use is what matters, rather than the rear panel design. Now I've used this phone daily since January, and the hardware and software experience has been almost flawless for everything I've used it for. The performance is great. So great in fact that I forgot for a long time just how old this phone actually is. The A11 chip loads apps pretty quickly, in fact only marginally slower than the iPhone 11 does, and that is all thanks to iOS 13's optimization. Multitasking is great, and I can switch between my usual music and social network apps with ease thanks to the 3GB of RAM. That being said, background app killing can be an issue, and I notice it most with non-essential apps like Notes or Photos. Luckily the phone knows not to kill the active music app when a song is playing, but if you pause the song, go and do something else and come back, you'll most likely have to go and reopen your playlist because the app will have been killed in the background. Apps will get closed in the background and you will occasionally experience some lag, but that's what you would expect from a 3-year-old device. It's inevitable that performance from this phone will have become slower, but iOS 13 has really changed the game with this iPhone to the point where it feels like it's brand new again. So in reality, the issues that you'll experience, you probably won't notice 99% of the time. Of course, you shouldn't expect it to be as fast as the newer iPhones, but it's close, like, it's really close. Face ID isn't massively fast, but thanks to iOS 13, it has been improved significantly pretty recently. It isn't as fast or reliable as the newer iPhones, but it has kept up pretty well. It's funny how Face ID got adopted so easily within iOS and the whole Apple ecosystem, and iOS 13 has apparently improved the speed of Face ID by up to 30% for this phone, which is great not only because it means your phone will be faster, but it also proves that Apple are actually trying to put some time into their older generation devices, which in the past they've been known to pretty much kill. Something that not many people mention these days is 3D touch, and it's always been something that I've loved. Although not many apps utilize it, it still remains as another layer of interaction with your phone that adds to the ease and the convenience of use. And it feels natural even through the latest iOS update, even though the newer iPhones have abandoned the technology completely. And don't get me wrong, the iPhone X only has a marginal improvement over the newer iPhones through 3D touch, but it is something that I like. Although my use for 3D touch is mostly on the lock screen for enabling the torch, and in the default keyboard for scrubbing through what I've already written, I still miss it whenever I use a newer iPhone, because having to touch and hold a button for a set amount of time is not, and can never be, a direct replacement. It just doesn't feel as natural. So although it may not be something that you're thinking about, 3D touch does give the iPhone X a little bit of an advantage. iOS is at a point where it's so well refined from what it once was, that it honestly just leaves you wanting more. This could be a good thing if you're just looking for the simplicity and the streamlined approach that iOS has, but if you're coming from Android, you may miss some of the deeper customization features that Android is well known for. Apple have given this phone every update that there's been for iOS, and it's rumoured to be getting iOS 14 in the future. But even if it doesn't, iOS 13 is great. With a dark mode system-wide that looks absolutely brilliant on this OLED display, and little refinements that Apple have added that vastly improve how iOS looks and feels, the software experience is truly great. You see, with any phone you'll notice the performance issues when you're using it for a shorter amount of time. For example, if you're on the phone to change your playlist, or to take a photo or send a text, single task usage is probably where you'll notice the most performance issues with any phone. And the good news with iOS 13 and the iPhone X is that this isn't apparent. I'm beyond amazed at how fast this phone is, considering its age, and it is all pretty much thanks to iOS 13, because before I bought this phone I watched some reviews of it on iOS 12, and it was nowhere near as good as it is now, so iOS 13 really has changed the game here. The battery life that you experience will mainly depend upon the health of the battery in the phone you buy. My iPhone has 100% of its battery health, so I've been able to get 9 hours or more of battery with 4 to 5 hours of screen on time, and this is actually great. For a device this age, it can see me through a day or more of usage with no issues whatsoever. iOS 13 has not only improved the battery performance, but also the longevity of its health through these smarter charging methods, which you can read more about on the Apple website. But it's going to be extremely useful in the long term. Animations are so well polished that it's able to hide some of the performance loss that this phone could experience now and in the future. Things like the switching of apps, the 3D touch previews, and the AirPods ecosystem style pairing, all of these things are perfect, and Apple has been able to refine the little details so well. Now you're probably thinking that this iPhone sounds too good to be true, and yeah, you're right, because the cameras suck. They really suck. Although on paper the standard and telephoto cameras are decent, each photo has this sort of soft blur to it as if the shutter speed was crazily long for a phone. And it occurs in every single photo that I've taken on this phone, no matter what. It doesn't help that Apple have made no effort to improve the camera quality on this phone since its release, but maybe the existence of the XS is the improvement I'm looking for. Occasionally I'll snap a photo that looks marginally better than they usually do, but I've got to be real, that is rare. Portrait mode on this phone is weirdly a lot better than I expected, but there's still nowhere near the standard that we've come to love today. To be honest, the photos from this phone in any mode are just disappointing. It'll be fine for Snapchat or other social media uses, but if you've seen the quality of today's Pixel phones, or more importantly, today's iPhones, you'll realise why I hate these cameras so much. And unfortunately with this phone, I found myself not using the camera at all until it came around to reviewing the phone, and I think that is just a testament to how bad these cameras really are. You see, this phone, through its flaws and through its terrible camera, its occasionally bad RAM management, and the sides that scratch easier than a piece of acrylic, is still one hell of a great phone. This iPhone, when it was released, wasn't worth £1,000 in my opinion. It felt like a proof of concept device at the time. It was something that people hated for its notch and its headphone port removal. But used for almost a third of its original price, it would be hard to find such a good iPhone for that price tag. And through Apple supporting it so well through software, it's sort of become like a hidden gem within the used iPhone market. If you were thinking of buying an iPhone X and you can't stretch your budget for the camera improvements that the iPhone XS offers, Apple have proved their dedication to keeping this phone alive, and it can only get better with iOS 14. Producing this video was a little bit different actually, because usually what I do is I record the A-roll, edit it completely, and then shoot my B-roll according to that, and I found that to be really inefficient. This was actually pointed out to me by a couple of my YouTube friends, and only when it was pointed out to me how inefficient this is, I actually realised that I shoot probably about double the amount of footage, or even more sometimes, than I actually use. From now on, that I'm going to go through my script, make a direct list of exactly what I'll need, and shoot according to that, and then edit it all together. So if that works, then obviously you'll see because this video would have been uploaded pretty close to my last one, but if not, then you'll know because I'm banking on it not working because I'm inefficient. This is also the first video where I've tried to use some CGI in it, so I've been learning Blender. I got a model of an iPhone 10, and a couple of the shots, I'll show you exactly which ones here, but a couple of these were actually CGI just dropped in to see if I can change it up a little bit and be a little bit more creative, because eventually I'm going to run out of locations that I can film phones in, and I'm going to be filming them in the same location twice, because we can't go out from lockdowns, so I can fake locations and fake lighting with Blender.